Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to be working on this 10 by 12 canvas board. First of all, I'm going to prep it with this gesso and I'm going to give it a few layers and sand in between because it gives a lovely smooth texture, which is what we want for this one. So here we are. The first layer have been applied and is now dry. So I'm going to just give it a quick rub. It's quite fine sandpaper, just needs to take off the surface of the paint, the gesso that you've just put on. So give it a good brush and you can see how much comes off actually when you do this. And then I'm going to give it another coat. You can do as many coats of this as you want to get as much smoothness, but I think I'm just going to do a couple for this. If you find it struggles to move on the second or maybe third coats, just add a tiny drop of water. And now I'm going to go in, everything is dried, so I'm now going to go in with this titanium white. I'm going to do a lovely abstract here, which is a bit experimental. So first of all, mixing a little Payne's grey there into that top right hand corner. And now I'm going to use a catalyst tool and I'm smoothing that and it pushes the paint right into the canvas. And over the top, I'm going to apply the white. I'll be honest, I do find these catalysts a little bit bulky to use. I've actually got quite small hands and I find them a little bit awkward to use, but I need to practice with them. So I'm going to add a little bit more depth of Payne's grey here, pulling it up, and you can see it's blending in with the paint we've already put on. You can see the areas I've actually sprayed with my water and flow enhancer as well. Now I'm going to use an outliner. This is a Pebeo and it's a gold one. Now this is actually quite an old tube, so I'm having to press quite hard. I'm going to invest in a new one soon, but I want to just use this to make up a line that breaks across that canvas board. And I'm just going to add in other little areas and just sort of, it looks like it's crackled. I like that sort of effect. Now I'm going to smooth out where the lumps have happened. I'm just going to use my small palette knife and just flatten those out because they will add interest and texture. And I'm just going to level some of those areas. So picking little bits just to pull out, just to smooth and just add a little bit of interest in there. Right the way across there as well on that other side. And now I'm actually going to go back over the top, now that first application has dried. I'm going to do another line, and this time I'm not going to smudge it in. So it's a question of just carefully squeeze it where you want it, and it dries where it is, so it stays quite textured, quite raised, which is what we want here. And now I'm just going to add in with the little palette knife some titanium white. Doesn't matter about going over that, it's fully dry. It doesn't take very long to dry actually. As long as it's fairly set, you can do this afterwards. So adding in a few colours, and I do like that particular palette knife to flatten stuff. This is another first for me. I've never actually mixed my own more fluid acrylic paint, so it would act like an ink. I'm using Prussian Blue and a very, very small amount of Perylene Green, which is really dark, and I'm just mixing it in that plastic cup with some just tap water, using the spatula just to sort of shake it up a little bit. It's going to be a mixture, so I'm trying to get a nice fluid consistency like an ink. You keep adding the water until you're happy with it. And I tried on a little test of paper and I like that colour. It has got that blue-green and it has got a drop in consistency. I have added a tiny bit of yellow in there as well, just to soften it. And now I'm going to apply it, pouring it out, as I've seen on various videos, and see what happens. It takes a little bit of courage, and I'm just going to tip it into that area and pull it across. I like that, it's pulling quite nice. I'm using that catalyst tool again, which is number 6, and I'm just going to move it around the bottom half of our canvas board and see what happens. It's just really easy to sort of push it around into different areas, push it back up, and it's really worked quite well. I'm happy with that. I've only mixed a small amount because we've only got a small canvas, but tipping it now, letting it move, do its own thing, and then softening that edge with the sprayed water. I want to get rid of that harsh edge there, so I'll keep working until that's disappeared. But it's worked really well. And now I'm going to go in with some drops of the pearlescent ink, acrylic ink. And this, because it has pigments in it, doesn't move very well, so I can mix it in. And what I want to show you is how it works in that fluid. It's going to make some interesting effects. Can you see how it's sort of stayed in little areas, little islands of pigment? When this is dry, they're going to show through really nicely. So I'll balance that with that top corner, get that little bit of colour going in there with that spray. It's a really beautiful blue colour, this. I don't quite know what we would call it. It isn't quite Prussian because it's got the green in it, but it's a very ocean colour. And I'm just going to add a few more dots of acrylic, metallic here and there. And this is my favourite spatula. This is the favourite of the Catalyst because I find it much more manageable. So pulling that colour around. Remember, this isn't planned. This is just intuitively deciding what I want at the time. And I'm going in with the mid-sized palette knife and the titanium white, blending. The ink is still wet, paint is still wet. It doesn't matter. I want that to mix in. So I'm adding a little bit more Payne's grey in here now. I want this area to be a little darker. And then I can blend it with this soft brush. This is about an inch wide brush. And I'm just going to pull that colour down. It's just giving it a little bit of structure. And I know that's taken out all that corner, but I'm not worried about that. I'm going to smooth that out with the palette knife while it's still wet, so it creates interesting patterns. And now I'm using the pipette to add that green blue in that corner again, and also add some water to it. This is the beauty of building an abstract. You build it in layers. You don't quite know where it's going to go necessarily, but you just keep going, adding different things. I'm taking out a little bit of that paint as well. I don't want it to dry too solid. And now this is the effect we've got after I've left it to dry overnight. It's really coming along very nicely. I'm liking these contrasted areas. I like the shimmer of this gold. It's really pretty, even through the ink, the paint. It's showing through in different areas, and you see the little islands that we've got down at the bottom. Just really, really soft, and yet they're there and they're present, and I like the colours that have moved out here. I'm going to do a little bit of extra work on this area and along here as well. It needs a little bit of something extra. So first of all, I'm going to add a little depth to that bottom left-hand corner. I want a little bit more blue. So I'm adding in pure Prussian blue paint just with the palette knife on top of that dried area, and then blending in some white to soften as it meets. It's just a question of what you want to get from an image. So you can see I've blended in quite a lot. I've added a few bits of white further over to the left, and now I'm bringing that with that tiny palette knife, just scraping that across the white, softening that edge, adding a little bit more depth, using that ink, that paint that we've made with a brush, and then blending it just with a flat brush just to soften it out, to give interest in different areas. I'm liking it so far, but I want to add a little bit of darker up to this corner. So again, I've dipped the round brush into the paint mix that we've done, and I've added that in up there, and bringing it around with the flat and the water just to soften and let it run, and it's added a lot more interest to that top corner as well. Now I'm going to go in with the paint again, and I'm just going to drop that Prussian blue into that edge. And I'm also going to put a line of it underneath because it stops it looking so blunt. I'm pulling it down with that knife. We're spreading it into that area there. A little bit of white just to soften as it meets that grey edge. And that's looking a lot better. And we've got lovely interest going on in different areas. We've got depths. We've got just some fascinating things going on where the paint's covered the outliner. It's made interest. Now I'm just going to graze across with some bright gold and just start to connect those little islands and add grazed interest here. Because this is slightly brighter than the ink that I've used, I'm going to add that as a little bit of a highlight. And I'm just going to continue adding little bits where I think across that canvas and really make it come alive. And I think that's really worked well. I'm going to put a little bit of gold under there as well, just to warm that area. And you can see as I'm pulling it down, it's adding connections with those early areas of gold that we did with the outliner. And I'm going to go back in with the outliner and add some interesting little circles. The idea from this came from the paint that had dried around the acrylic tube. Actually had formed a circle and it fell off as I removed the lid, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, that would be an interesting shape to do. And again, with this outliner, it will be much easier to do with a new one, which is going to be much softer. And here we have what I consider to be almost finished, but I'm not happy with this little bit here. I want to just perk up these circles, and I'm going to just add in some of this very, very pale gold pearlescence. You'll be able to see this when I tip this board in a second and show you. It's almost a white gold, and I'm just grazing it here and there and just adding the extra elements. Can you see how that lovely shimmer, it really picks up interest there? It covers the greeny areas we've got and picks those out really beautifully. But I'm going to do something now with that circle that's got the gold in. I'm not keen on that where it sort of pokes through, so I'm just going to go in with titanium white and a soft brush and just fill that in. And it's going to stand out because of that now. And I'm going to just clean up that one. It had a little bit of ink in there. And I'm going to add it into these other two circles over the top. And I am really happy with this. I find it soothing. I hope you've enjoyed that. And I hope you'll give something similar a try yourselves. All the details will be in the description. And I look forward to seeing you for another project soon. Keep painting. Bye bye.